So here we are looking at the Ride Diva binding, which is a pretty good binding. There's just a couple issues I have with it personally, and that we had that kind of like kept it from becoming like a really highly recommendable binding. It's still a very recommendable binding, but it's just not the tops. And here's some of the reasons that detracted us from it. One, the ratchets and the straps that attach to the ratchets, the whole ratchet system just feels a little off, and it's just nowhere in the realm of some of the greats when it comes to ratchets, like the like Union bindings and Burton bindings. They just have amazing ratchet systems, where these feel kind of a little lacking, and like they might not really hold up when it comes to long-term use. Long-term reliability seems to be on the lower end. So that's kind of a bummer, and they're not that smooth. Like, see, this one gets a little kink here, and I haven't been able to work it out. And Steph felt the same way when she was reviewing these, and we felt the same with the men's. They kind of have similar design there. Then the second part is the toe strap. Pardon me. It's got really hard plastic right here and here, so that's a bit of a problem if you have a soft toe box in your boot. It pinches, this just pinches in, and it kind of collapses the sides if it's softer. If it's stiffer, I noticed that with the men's bindings that have the same design as this, when I was wearing one type of boot that was had a real stiff toe box, it would be fine. But then when I wore a softer boot, it would collapse and become a problem. So I think that's why, like, one year we had a problem at the demos and another year we didn't. Well, now that we got this extended demo, we can really see what it's all about and really test it and kind of figure out what's going on there. Because the toe straps didn't change, but that was kind of a problem. The other thing is, this metal is, we like the metal, except for one part. This is just like a thin, like, probably 1 millimeter EVA foam, kind of foam padding on the part where the metal contacts with the board. And that concerns us a little, because even with that padding, it still feels like you're going to get a lot of metal on the board, especially with impacts and buttering and stuff like that. You're really stressing this very thin little EVA foam patch, and so you've got a little more metal on board, which I don't really like. This whole region, the whole black region here, is pressing into the board. So we don't like that. We didn't notice any marks initially, but maybe over time that could be a problem. So those are kind of our biggest concerns. But the rest of the binding is really well designed and really well made. And we find that first off, it's got just super soft, super twisty high back. However, if you want to rotate the high back, you can still, and you've got a lot of high back rotation ability. You can see this area right here. You can slide the high back almost as far as you can, or as far as you can with Burton, which is one of the best in terms of high back rotation. So you've got that there. Then dialing out this binding to fit your boot is pretty exceptional. First off, you have, see these two screws here? You can slide these back and forth, and you can see the screws right here too. You can slide this heel loop forward or backwards a lot to really dial it out to your bindings. Now, this has something that's better than, I feel is better than the men's equivalent of this, which is, this is kind of like a combination between the LTD and the Capo, it seems like. You've got a sliding toe plate. So you just pop the top here. You have 3 adjustable places, just like you do with the men's binding, but the heel stays in the same place, so it can expand and contract, where the men's bindings that I've tried, the heel loop, the footbed just slides this way. It's just, you either slide it forward or slide it backwards. So that means either the toe ramp's longer and the heel plate, or whatever you call it, is shorter, and then, you know, vice versa. So I love this. It's even better than the men's bindings I've tried, and I love that. I love the canted footbed because when you have a cant, it kind of helps you line up your joints better. And snowboarding is kind of an unnatural stance. It's hard on the hips, it's hard on the knees, and hard on the ankles. For some, it could be all of those. For others, it could just be one thing. Like for me, it's hard on my hips because I don't have great hips, apparently. So, you know, it's one of those things where I have friends, though, who don't have great knees, and it bothers their knees, where I've never had knee problems. But, you know, in others, it's in their ankles. But most of the time, it's knees and hips. And this little canted thing helps you align, along with good shock absorption. So you can ride all day with these. There's nice, soft EVA foam that really holds up well in cold and in, you know, warmer conditions. So I like that. You've got your typical high back adjustability, and it looks like when all the way up, it looks like it's pretty close to being straight. Maybe just a touch of forward lean, but with this, it's not that bad. There's going to be no calf bite. Now, mini discs. Love these mini discs. This is the Ride mini disc, and I'm comparing it to a Union mini disc. Because you have all this adjustability with the Diva binding to start with, you can really dial it out to your boot, so it fits the boot centered. You can, if you get the right board, you can center it on board properly. You get the right waist width and overall width from, you know, from tip tail to waist. It fits your bindings correctly and boots. Then you can take these discs, and instead of using them this way to slide to even out on the board perfectly, you can turn them this way, and you got a lot of stance width adjustability, and that's really cool. If you compare it to Union, you only have a few millimeters each way, and I've found that with these bindings, and these would be the equivalent to the women's Milan or men's Contact or Contact Pro, or basically same mini disc across their line. And same with Ride, they have the same mini disc. Ride's mini disc is a little bigger, but look at all that extra stance width. They're both Burton channel compatible, but look at all that extra slide you have with these. And you've got these cool screws. So you can see they can slide pretty far each way. And you know, with Unions, they don't really slide that much. You know, you've got maybe a 1/4 inch total, you know, a few millimeters basically. And I love this little thing that holds the screws in place. It's just one less way to lose them. And so all in all, I like this disc, and I think that's because they're working with metal that they can make this happen, where this is plastic. So, you know, in terms of butterability, Union wins, but only by a little bit. I was surprised as to how well Ride's bindings held up when it came to that. Usually, you know, most bindings have a wider footprint, like kind of like where my fingers are is where a normal binding would end, or maybe even more so. And with Ride, you just got minimal contact there. And I think that combined with the mini disc is one of the reasons why it was close to the Union Milan that we compared it against in terms of butterability, which is pretty cool for an all-metal base. It's not as good as Union, but it's close. And, you know, there's a lot of dead with all that metal touching board, but it's way more butterability than you would think, and way more response than you would think for, you know, for this high back and the ankle strap, which kind of like wraps around really well. It's got a long wrap. It gets way down around the ankle, so it's more supportive than you would think for its small size, but it's still more about freedom of movement, and that combined with this soft high back, it's definitely got a more freestyle-y, skatey feel to it, but you still got a good bit of response that you wouldn't think you'd have from, you know, this soft toe ramp and heel ramp. It really does, this metal It's a combination of metal and plastic and foam. Has been well thought out, and you get a lot of response. So all in all, I feel the Ride Diva does a great job with a lot of things. Just tops with adjustability. Love the canting. You love the feel underfoot. And then I think if they could deal with you know, the foam here, the metal, the contact with metal on board. I've seen some other ride bindings put a nice strong plastic layer between, like plastic / rubber layer between, that seems to be better. I'd love to see that on this instead of just a small foam. And they could fix the ratchets and the toe strap. I think they would have an amazing binding. As it stands now, it's a pretty good binding though. So if this appeals to you and you can deal with the faults that I mentioned, then I think you could love this binding.